With great excitement, I introduce you to Northwood University, a truly exceptional institution in American higher education. Since 1959, this private, accredited university has been a vibrant bastion of free thought and enterprise, standing out among the thousands of other schools in the U.S. Known as America's Free Enterprise University, Northwood is dedicated to nurturing the next generation of leaders who drive global social and economic progress. At the heart of Northwood lies the Northwood idea, a philosophy that celebrates individual freedom, responsibility, and the importance of moral law and free enterprise. This entrepreneurial spirit is evident in that 1/3 of Northwood alumni own businesses. Northwood is more than an institution. It's a movement that empowers students to think critically and champion liberty. It is a rare gem in today's academic world. If you're passionate about supporting a university that values intellectual growth and free enterprise, or to learn more about its academic programs, visit northwood.edu.
Hi, everybody. The last few days, I've had a series of female honey badgers that have been on the show. As you know, the honey badger is a very fierce, dogged creature, and we certainly have one today. She is not afraid to take on the big guys and come out victorious. Today, I've got Laila Mickelwait. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you. So I'm just going to introduce you very quickly and show your book. You are the co-founder and CEO of the Justice Defense Fund. You are the founder of Trafficking Hub. You hold a master's degree of public diplomacy from USC. We could talk about how USC treated me when I went there to give a talk last year. It wasn't pretty. And you are the author of the national bestseller, Take Down Inside the Fight to Shut Down Pornhub for Child Abuse, Rape, and Sex. Welcome on the show.
Trafficking, sex trafficking.
Sex trafficking.
Yes.
I missed the trafficking. Thank you. Let me repeat the title. Take Down Inside the Fight to Shut Down Pornhub for Child Abuse, Rape, and Sex Trafficking. Did I miss anything that you'd like to add in the bio?
No, that's great. Thank you.
Okay, so let's maybe start with, I think you began your activism on this issue in 2006. What compelled you to start down that very dark rabbit hole?
Yeah, well, I mean, I grew up in a family where my father had, he was just a beautiful person. He was a general and vascular surgeon that had dedicated his own life to saving lives, and, at great expense himself. It was a real sacrifice for himself and our family for him to choose that particular profession, but he wanted to make a difference. And I think, even from an early age, just watching him do what he did impacted me and influenced me. And he was also, very attuned to issues around the world. He was paying attention. He would watch, History Channel documentaries, the news, and always trying to get down to the root causes of things like, slavery and war. And we had some of our most meaningful conversations and bonding moments as father and daughter, speaking about these very deep subjects. And so I think from a very young age, I was kind of attuned to wanting to pursue something in the realm of human rights issues. And I ended up doing that after my father, brought me into the living room one day and showed me a documentary about sex trafficking. It was child sex trafficking in Calcutta, India. And I was just so shocked, and I was horrified that this could even be real, that this could be happening to the most innocent, to children. And it set me on a path of learning, discovery, research, and then ultimately engaging in the fight against sex trafficking. And that's what I did. So that's, I kind of set myself on that path and have stayed on it until today. That's how I got involved.
Well, I mean, in the intro, I mentioned the honey badger. You may or may not know this, Laila, but in the last chapter, The Parasitic Mind, this yellow book, I talk about a call, a call to action, and I say activate your inner honey badger. And precisely because the honey badger truly epitomizes what it is to be fierce, to be ferocious. It's the size of a small to medium-sized dog, and yet it could withstand an attack from 6 adult lions because of its ferocities. Now, when I'm asking people to activate their inner honey badger, I'm not saying to be violent, but I'm saying once you see something that you can defend, that you have a set of principles, you shouldn't cower in silence. You should engage. You know, your voice matters. And in a sense, you exactly exemplify that, because it starts with you having these wonderful conversations with your dad, and then he empowers you with the honey badger spirit. Is this something that we can teach in a seminar, or do we all have to pray that we have as lovely and nurturing father as you did in order for us to nurture that capability?
That's such a great question. And I would love to hear what you think about that. But I think a lot of it maybe comes from experience and practice as you grow up and as you maybe confront smaller things in your life, maybe things that may seem not very consequential, but they're wrong. And I have a whole chapter of my book where I'm thinking back and reflecting, from a very young age and on in first grade when the classroom bully, was kissing girls against their will when they would squirm in disgust. And, we were telling him to stop and he wouldn't do it. And then one day I was bending my head to drink at the water fountain at the playground and he came and swooped in and kissed me on the lips. And I was so angry that he did this, but I wanted to teach him a lesson. It was wrong. And so I, came behind him. He was on one of the steepest slides on the playground and I kind of shoved him down with all my force and he was crying and I felt a sense of accomplishment for what I had done. And so, I kind of reflect on different experiences like that in my younger years when there was something that was wrong and I knew it was wrong and I was able to practice this, I guess, pursuit of justice and not being afraid to confront injustice. And I think probably it's that, it's not like we wake up one day with courage to do something that's difficult in the face of opposition. But if you've been exercising that muscle, I guess, in your younger years, that maybe it becomes more natural and easier to do. But
I
I'd love
think,
to know what you think.
yeah. Oh, thank you for turning it back to me. I think what your answer hints to is something that I talk about as a evolutionary behavioral scientist that tries to tease out, how much of a particular phenomenon is due to nature versus nurture. In a sense, it addresses your question, which is, I think that you meaning Laila, were already born with the personhood to be a fighter, but then that could be further nurtured, right? So now, even if you're not born with that mentality, there are things that you can pursue to empower that quality in you or to ignite it. So, like most things, it really is a mixture of nature and nurture. So, for example, one of the in my own battles of trying to save the West from parasitic ideas, from the dreadful ideas that are destroying our enlightened societies, I try to convince people that their voice matters, irrespective of how small they think and inconsequential their voice is, right? Because they'll often retort back to me, well, I'm not Joe Rogan. I don't have a podcast with 20 million people. I'm not some fancy professor with all the titles. I say, but that doesn't mean that doesn't absolve you from when your professor says something idiotic in the classroom, challenge them politely. If you're at a bar and someone says something that is insane, maybe you can challenge them. Don't always diffuse the responsibility. It's not only for Laila to take care of sex trafficking on behalf of all of us. You have a voice. Have you been, you've been able to gather an army, I think, of 2 million people. Has that been some of the ways by which you were able to bring them on to the team?
Well, I love what you said. And, when I started this battle with Pornhub for monetizing and globally distributing sex crimes, including child abuse and trafficking, I didn't have a big platform. I had a few thousand followers on Twitter, but I knew what was going on was completely unjust. I mean, it was a horrific crime against these victims, shattering their lives, and I couldn't keep quiet about it. And so it really evolved organically on Twitter, where I was taking what I knew, what I had discovered about this site and what was going on, and I was sharing it with passion, trying to tagging, the FBI and the Prime Minister of Canada and celebrities and people and just saying, this is happening, and at that time, if I thought, well, what could I do? I'm just one person shouting on Twitter. Is this going to do anything? And if I kind of back down from that position of feeling disempowered to really make a difference just because I didn't have a big platform, none of this would have ever happened. And so I guess to your point, I would just encourage people, and I hope my story is inspiring to others to say I'm a regular person who, when this began, was some of the worst time of my life, when I had a baby who was very sad, 3-month-old, who had gone through a birth complication and was up at all hours of the day and night screaming. And I'm, comforting him in the darkness of my bedroom, thinking about some stories that I had heard in the news about children who had been trafficked and found on Pornhub. And we can talk about some of those stories. But when I discovered what was going on Pornhub, again, it was just, it was a small platform, but it was an important message. And I knew it had to get out, and the truth had to be told. And I think that's what's important, is that when you have a conviction about something, when you know something is wrong and you call it out, it doesn't matter who's listening. It's your responsibility to do it regardless.
Yeah, I mean, I often tell people when they ask me, well, why do you get involved in all these things? I mean, you lead enough of a stressful life. Why do you take on all these difficult situations where you get death threats and so on? And I always tell people, and I'm almost willing to bet that this is likely to resonate with you. I tell people that I'm my worst critic, if you'd like, in that, I need to please myself in the deep recesses of my thoughts, so that when I go to bed at night and I put my head on the pillow, the only way that I can feel whole and that I will not, toss and turn with insomnia, is to know that I was fully authentic and that I didn't walk away from defending truth, defending freedom, defending, in your case, children's rights not to be raped. And so if I didn't do that, I would feel like a fraud, and nothing would be more painful to my sense of personhood. And I suspect that probably applies to you, correct?
That resonates with me so much, because, something that I try to do often is think about death. And this may seem morbid to some people, but I feel like it's a really important practice for me, is to think about, being on my deathbed or visiting my grave, in my mind, and thinking, do I have regrets? I don't want to have regrets. And if I do, then go back and fix what it was that I would regret that I didn't do, that I should have done, or that I did that I shouldn't have done. So yeah, I mean, in that sense, it totally resonates with me, is that I don't want to get to the end of my life and think I should have done this and I was scared, or, and have those regrets. And that really is helpful.
So how did you, I mean, one of the things that it's kind of become a joke now, but that song by, is it Sarah McLaughlin or McLaughlin? It's the eyes of a angel or something. It's the
Oh, I know
animal.
that song you're talking about.
It's the
Yeah.
animal cruelty. So I've been conditioned, like a operant conditioning or Pavlovian conditioning, to, as soon as I hear that, I want to flip the channel, because I simply cannot bear to watch the very powerful images of animal cruelty. And so while I want to protect every animal, even in the, I'm not a vegan, I eat animals, and I recognize that they are treated horribly, which is a moral dilemma that I face. It's very, very hard to ever be exposed to those images. Now, in your case, and you can tell us, fill in the details, you have to go and, quote, consume those videos. How are you able to do that and actually come on the show today without having jumped off the proverbial ledge? What kind of fortitude must you have had to inoculate yourself against the horrors of what you were viewing?
I think part of it is having purpose in pain, is knowing it's not without reason. And having the power to press pause, right? And understanding that victims don't have that. They have to live with this trauma for the rest of their lives, as it's been immortalized online. And they do call it the immortalization of their trauma. One victim said, my rapist put me in a mental prison, but Pornhub gave me a life sentence, because they actually had a download button on every single video. And many of these were blatant rape, unconscious rape, trafficking, and even consensually filmed, but non-consensually uploaded, revenge porn, image-based sexual abuse. It's kind of like there's a spectrum of abuse all the way from child rape to self-generated child pornography in this age of sexting, right? Where then it gets uploaded online and it sends a victim into a spiral of trauma. I can give one example of how that has happened. There was a girl named Serena. She was the kind of face of this groundbreaking article in the New York Times by Nicholas Kristof called "The Children of Pornhub" that was released in December of 2020. And she was an innocent 14-year-old girl. She had never kissed a boy before. She was a straight A student, and she had a crush on a boy older than her who had convinced him to impress him to send her some nude images and videos, which she did. He sent them to classmates, and then they ended up getting uploaded to Pornhub, getting millions of views. And she would beg for them to be removed. They would hassle her, prove that you're a victim, prove that you're underage. If they answered at all, she may get one down, and they would get uploaded again and again in this sadistic, game of whack-a-mole of a child trying to handle this. And it sent her into this spiral of despair. She ended up being bullied at school. She had to drop out of school. She ended up self-medicating to numb the pain, and she ended up living homeless out of a car. And that was the trajectory for her. And then we have adults. It's not just children who've been affected, adults who've been raped, trafficked, abused on the site, a spectrum of abuse. But I think the thing that really has helped me is, the idea of it's pain that has a purpose, and actually seeing the traction and seeing the progress that we have been making by bringing this truth to the world to say, Pornhub is the largest, or was the largest and most popular porn site in the world. At the time that this fight against them began in early 2020, they had 130 million visits per day, 47 billion visits to the site per year, enough content uploaded every year. It would take 169 years to watch if you put those videos back to back. So 6.9 million videos. Researchers had named Pornhub the third most influential tech company on global society, just behind Facebook and Google. And it was the 10th most trafficked website in the world. This was a household brand name for porn. There were people, joking about it on Saturday Night Live, and they had pop-up shops for New York Fashion Week, and people are wearing their apparel proudly in public. And at the same time, it was an unchallenged crime scene. Because what I discovered in, one night in February 1st, 2020, I was thinking about the story of that I had recently heard in the news of a 15-year-old girl from Florida who was missing for an entire year. She was finally found when her mother was tipped off by a Pornhub user that he recognized her daughter on the site. And she was found in 58 videos being raped and trafficked. They were able to actually match the attacker, the rapist's face in the Pornhub videos to surveillance footage from a 7-Eleven, and they were able to locate the girl from his apartment and rescue her. He had impregnated her. And it was just this horrific story. And I kept coming back to it. Also, at the same time, there was an investigation that was published by the London Sunday Times that had found dozens of illegal videos on Pornhub within minutes, even children as young as 3 years old. And so I had been thinking about that, thinking, how in the world did this content end up on Pornhub? And a wise phrase my dad always used to say is, assumption is the mother of all screw ups. And we were all collectively assuming, right? Millions and millions of people were assuming that this content was vetted, that it was legal and consensual, because that is what they had been projecting to the world. I mean, they had done an amazing job actually of spending millions of dollars on PR for their image. They had this whole arm of Pornhub called Pornhub Cares, which was the philanthropy arm of Pornhub, where they were doing these highly publicized campaigns to save the bees and save the whales and clean the oceans and donate for breast cancer research. And at the same time, their site was infested with illegal content, because when I tested the upload system, so I had an idea, I said, listen, I'm just going to test this upload system to see what it takes to upload content to the world's largest porn site. And this is user-generated porn. So this is the YouTube of porn, right? Anybody with a phone,
Right.
anywhere in the world can film a sex act, upload it online. So I just said, let me test it. I took a video of the dark room, the keyboard, and just went through that process in minutes without any verification of ID, without any verification of consent, anonymously with only an email address. You were able to upload content to Pornhub. And that is how I started to connect the dots that this site is potentially one of the largest repositories of sexual crime in North America, if not the world. At the time, they had almost 11 million videos on this site. They had 42 million images that were uploaded with the same non-verification process. And that's when it all began. And I said, I have to sound the alarm on this. What is going on? And that's when Trafficking Hub began. I started the hashtag on Twitter, Trafficking Hub, and it all kind of spiraled from that moment when I made that discovery.
So there are different constituencies, if you'd like, of evil here. There is, okay, the perpetrators of the acts, the rapists, the traffickers, and so on. Okay, fine, we can talk about those, but we have an intuition why they're doing what they're doing. We have the Pornhub people who probably are just driven by greed. You know, I think that 99 point, I'm speaking now as if I were them, 99.9% of all of the stuff is completely legal and between consenting adults. We don't have the sieve or the algorithms to be able to ensure that every single clip that's up there is good, and we'll do our best next time around. Does that sound like
Absolutely not.
That's not what they say?
Absolutely not. I mean, that, well, that may be what they try to project to the public.
Yeah, that's what I meant. That's
right. As that they're kind of this passive entity that doesn't really have, although when they started to be confronted with what was going on, they made some very damning statements about their own policies, which we can talk about. But
So
the
meaning,
onion layers of peeling back the deep complicity of Pornhub and its owners are, you know, part of this story, and the intentional decisions that they made that enabled and monetized this illegal content knowingly is really unbelievable.
oh, okay.
But
So it's
go
not,
ahead.
so it's not the plausible deniability. Look,
Absolutely not. Oh no.
so they're willfully looking for that material.
Well, the way that they set up their system, so this is stuff that we uncovered as, so Trafficking Hub starts, hashtag, people, you know, starts catching on. Some new followers say, you got to start a petition to shut down Pornhub. This is unbelievable, and hold its executives accountable. So I start a petition. It goes viral. Today, we have 2.3 million signatures from every country in the world on the petition to shut down Pornhub and hold its executives accountable. And as this is going viral, victims are starting to come forward. Whistleblowers and insiders from the company are starting to come forward, and they're starting to reveal how this site works, the policies that these executives put in place to enable and allow the unrestricted content from being monetized online. So the way you have to understand the business model of free porn. So this is like the free user generated YouTube of porn. The way that they make the most money is by selling 4.6 billion ad impressions on Pornhub every day. And the only way that they can do that is if they have massive amounts of content to be picked up in Google so that it can drive massive amounts of traffic to the site so they can sell those advertising impressions. So from their perspective, they want no friction in uploading because they want as much content to be uploaded as possible. So moderators who came forward, they said, it was our job not to keep illegal content off the site, but to allow as much content to go through as possible. So let's just take a few of these business decisions, policy decisions that they made, knowing all the while they do not verify age and consent for upload, right? They had hired 10 moderators per shift. So per 8-hour shift, there was a team of 10 moderators in Cyprus. They had 30 total to be viewing these millions of videos and images that were being uploaded not only to Pornhub, but this is really important. Pornhub was owned by a parent company called MindGeek. MindGeek has a monopoly on the global porn industry. They own, you know, most of the world's most popular porn sites and brands, including most of the world's most popular tube sites like Pornhub. So these 10 moderators were in charge of not only Pornhub, but RedTube, YouPorn, GayTube, ExtremeTube, XTube, you know, YouPorn, all of these tubes. And they were reprimanded if they watched less than 700 videos per shift, where they would just skip through these videos with the sound off. It was just to say that they had somebody doing it.
Right.
Some of them were watching up to 2,000 videos per shift, just skipping through again. And they told me, I know people in my office that let very underage content go through. And it was because of the philosophy of the site, is they didn't want to keep that content off the site. So the other quick example I'll give is they had 1,800 employees working for this company. They were making hundreds of millions of dollars a year. And they hired one person 5 days a week to review videos that were flagged by users as terms of service violations, including child rape, trafficking, and other non-consensual sex acts. And they had a backlog of 706,000 videos. So imagine in a company that big, to hire one person to do that. And then they had a policy where they would only put a video in queue for review if it had over 15 flags. So a victim could flag their video 15 times and it wouldn't even be put in line for review. And we have internal emails that were uncovered in legal discovery in these lawsuits that victims are suing the company. And he says in these emails, as he's talking about this policy, that it's good and it's reasonable. So those are just some examples of the way that they set this up to enable and monetize exploitation.
Okay, so when I was starting earlier with the constituencies of evil, I mentioned the perpetrators, then I mentioned the porn hub, executives and owners, and the third group, which again you'll tell me whether it's willful ignorance or apathy or complicity. So why doesn't the criminal justice system, I'll let you explain the intricacies of who has jurisdiction over an internet company, but why aren't you able to mention this to someone in the Justice Department in the United States and they go, what? I didn't know this. All right, I'm on it. Tuesday morning, that's the first thing on my item, and I could shut this down in 4 minutes. What stops the good guys from intervening?
That's the question of the day. And I want to know what you think about it. Because that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get justice fully served. And it's so important because victims need justice in order to heal, in order to have closure for what happened when their lives have been completely shattered. And countless victims, I mean, it's out of their control, right? The criminal justice system is out of civilian control. That is up to the US government, the Canadian government. They have offices all over the world. They can be criminally prosecuted. In Canada, I can mention specifically the laws that they violated in Canada, where they're headquartered. But the civil justice system is in their control. And there are currently, over, let's say, nearly 300 victims suing in 25 lawsuits across the US, Canada, and the UK, including multiple class action lawsuits on behalf of tens of thousands of child victims. And they're not only suing the company, but they're suing the individual owners of the company. They're also suing their enablers, Visa, and the hedge funds. Dozens of these lawsuits are suing the hedge funds that actually provided the money for MindGeek to exist and knew the risk they were taking. And instead of saying, no, we don't want to have any part in monetizing child sexual abuse and rape, they said, let's charge 20% interest on our investment so we can make a lot of money on this high risk venture. So they're suing them for that. But that's the question, is what is holding back justice being fully served, where, we have an example of Backpage.com in the United States, where that website was selling cars. It was also selling children to be trafficked. And the Justice Department actually seized the site. If you go to Backpage.com, there's a seal of the Department of Justice that they have seized the site. They're prosecuting and sentencing the owners, I think even this week. So why? What's going on with Pornhub?
I mean, there could only be two possible bifurcations in terms of causes. One is there is a vested interest not to act. So that would only be if, whomever has the power to handle this issue is financially benefiting and doesn't want them. Now that seems a bit too conspiratorial. So could it simply be that the wheels of justice are moving, but they move so slowly that it's, you know, justice delayed is justice denied? Could that simply?
I think you're exactly right. And I think it's a matter of putting enough pressure. I think I'm a firm advocate. We need multiple strategies to see justice fully served. You know, one is hit them where it hurts, in the bank account. I mean, these companies, above everything else, are making their calculations about what they do and they don't do based on what is best for their bank account. And so victims being able to courageously pursue civil litigation, I think, is incredibly important, shining a huge spotlight on this issue, which I hope, you know, the book actually does, as it gets to many, many people who've never heard this story, and they go on a journey. Yeah, they go on a journey of discovery with me from that moment I described that night, February 1st, 2020. And, you know, it's told in first person, it's told in present tense, where you actually go through all of this. You meet the victims, you meet the whistleblowers, you watch the videos with me as I describe them in detail, what was, you know, being shown on the site.
You're almost making, you're assuring me that I might not end up reading your book, because as cowardly as it might sound, I don't want to be exposed to that kind of stuff. But that's my moral.
I felt like it was important, you know,
Yeah.
not to go too far, because there's so much more that I could have shared, but to do it enough where you understand this isn't pretend. A
Yeah.
lot of people want to assume, look, you just don't understand. This is consensual non-consent. This is just rough sex, and you're a prude who doesn't understand, right? That's what, no. I needed to explain this in a way where you know, without a doubt, what I know and what the victims know, and that this is real sexual crime. This is not pretend. And so, you know, not going too far, but going far enough where people understand the reality. And so there's a strong trigger warning on the front of in the front of the book. And people can skip over some of that stuff if it's too much. But I thought that, you know, it's important because this is, I feel, the indictment that hasn't been brought yet in the United States and Canada and other countries, that needs to be, with the evidence and the proof of what was going on. And so, you know, I hope that this helps raise the level of awareness and puts pressure on those in power to do something. You know, we've got the book in the hands of every member of Congress in the US, every state attorney general. And in Canada, we're trying to get it into the hands of MPs and those who can actually take action. There has been criminal action in the US. So there was a criminal charges that were brought against Pornhub in December of 2023 by the US federal government, where they were charged with knowingly benefiting and profiting from the transactions of 100 specific victims in California who were victims of sex trafficking. Unfortunately, they were offered a deferred prosecution agreement by the government, where they were told you have to pay $1.8 million and you have to have a government babysitter, basically a monitor over what you're doing for 3 years. And if you do these things, then we won't move forward with our full prosecution. But I feel like that is a slap on the wrist, to be honest. I mean, it's something, but so much more has to be done in order to really bring justice that is commensurate with the harm that has been done to victims.
What amazes me is that so many of these, you know, orgiastic transgressions, whether they be, I mean, certainly criminal ones or moral ones, how the perpetrators get away with it, right? So the 2008 housing bubble crisis, how many CEOs of those investment banks have gone to prison? Oh, none. When you think about the Sackler family, I had the author of the book that had done an expose on the, you know, the opioid crisis with the Sackler family and how they were involved. Yes, they ended up paying a hefty penalty, but I hope I'm not mistaken, but I don't think anybody served prison. So there are really two elements of punishment. There is the, as you said, hitting them where it hurts, which is, you know, their bank accounts. But at least from my perspective, maybe I'm too pure, that wouldn't be enough, right? I mean, you need to go for 80 years to prison, because that's, and now it's very confusing to me, because you often will hear a story of some football coach, maybe I'm being too stereotypical, but some football coach who's stopped because he downloaded child porn and he's got 80 of those photos and he gets sentenced to 37 years. So why isn't it that very easily, with the technology that we have today, you can go after all of them very, very quickly in one quick swoop. I mean, you download willingly images of where it's clear that it's a 4-year-old being raped. Well, we're coming after you. What stops the government from doing that?
Right. Well, I 100% agree with you. And I think that I agree as well that civil justice is not enough. It's something, and I think it's meaningful to victims, right? Because it's recognizing the harm done, which is so
Yeah.
important. But criminal justice, I think, is crucial, not only for what it does to victims and recognizing the harm and bringing them healing, but also because it becomes a deterrent to future abusers. So if we want to take a step back and say, okay, it's one thing to deal with Pornhub, but how are we going to prevent this from, on the internet as a whole, right? There's many user generated porn sites that are operating on the internet, and how are we going to stop this, right? So one way is we need to create a deterrent, because I call them corporate traffickers, right? It's a risk benefit calculation for them. And they will continue doing this as long as the benefit outweighs the risk. However, when you see a executive held accountable where they pierce that corporate veil and actually hold the owner accountable and they serve prison time, that will create an enormous deterrent for decision makers at these corporations running these websites to maybe do something different. At the same time, we need policy to prevent it in the future as well. So simply common sense policy that says, if you run a user-generated porn site, you have to verify the age and the consent of every individual and every video that is uploaded to that site. And I think it's really important for governments to do that, but because these are international corporations, even more important are for financial institutions to implement that policy. So Visa, MasterCard, Discover, PayPal, they say we do not do business with user-generated or websites that distribute user-generated porn unless they reliably verify via a third party the age and consent of those who are in the videos. And when they do that, it's instant, it's global, and these companies are so motivated to maintain their profits that they will comply. And so I think that could be a huge way to stop this in the future.
Yeah, well, as you know, if any of those folks end up going to prison, their time is not easily served when other prisoners find out what they're there for. So, even within the context of the prison ecosystem, there is a moral code, and the lowest person on that ladder is the child abuser. So, in a sense, you almost feel a sense of cosmic justice if a few of those guys can go in there, face a really rough time in there, and then cosmic justice has been meted out. Let me ask you, I hope you don't want me to ask you this. Of course, going after the non-consensual adult stuff, the revenge porn, as you said, bad. Rape of even an adult is bad. Of a child, it's horrifying. But do you take a position against porn in general, or you clearly make a delineation? I'm taking no moral stance against porn or porn consumers, or is it all part of one sort of crusade against porn in general?
Yeah, I think what's really important is our language, right? Because porn is porn. What I'm talking about is sexual crime. And in fact, when victims hear it called porn, it's very offensive and hurtful. And that's why we're moving away from even calling it child pornography, instead calling it child sexual abuse material, because there is a difference between legal pornography, which is again legal, and if it's done between two consenting adults and it's consumed by adults, that's none of my business. I don't, that's not the aim of my work. That's not the aim of Trafficking Hub. That's not the aim of the Justice Defense Fund, my organization. We are very specifically and narrowly focused on eliminating the distribution and the monetization of online sexual crime in all that kind of spectrum of illegality and non-consensual image-based sexual abuse. That is our position. And really quick, going back to what you were just talking about regarding criminal penalties, there's one thing I did want to add, and to understand for viewers that, there's actually a download button that they had placed on every single video. So they were transferring from their servers onto the devices of potentially 5 million users per hour who were consuming content on Pornhub. Every single video had a download button, and that would enable the actual transfer of this contraband, this illegal content, including, most obviously it's child sexual abuse, right? It's even illegal for a victim to possess their own child sexual abuse material. And so having that possessed on the servers, then transferred, right, from there to devices. And it's not a download like on YouTube when you can download it and then watch it later. It's an actual possession where you could then take that file and you could do what you want with it. You could re-upload it to Pornhub at the time that was happening, or to anywhere else across the internet. And in the US and Canada, I mean, that is actually a felony level offense, each instance of that. And I learned something interesting in Canada is that it's even illegal to distribute the depiction of a child, regardless of whether it's real or not. In Canada, it's actually a criminal offense. I don't know if many people knew this, to transfer or possess the depiction. And
You mean
think
like it
about
could be a
this.
drawing? What does depiction mean?
Yeah, it means that it would appear to be a real child,
Okay.
but it may not be, right? So it could be an 18-year-old that looks like they're
Oh, I see.
13. And consider this, that teen was one of the top searched terms on Pornhub for years in a row. And these teens, right? Like, think about the word teen. The only teens that are legal are 18 and 19.
Right.
But many of these videos that you would see on Pornhub appeared to be very young, braces, pigtails, flat chest, no makeup. And those videos that were depictions were interspersed with videos of real child sexual abuse. So I'm just putting that out there for people in Canada as far as the criminal code goes. I mean, there's a huge amount of liability there.
Wow.
And besides the fact that in Canada and in the US, it's mandatory to report child sexual abuse to the authorities when you're aware of it as a corporation. And it's a criminal offense in Canada. I think it's 7 years in prison that you can get if you don't report. And we have testimony from the heads of the leading child protection organizations in Canada and the US, as well as depositions that were taken of employees that now prove that Pornhub went 13 years without reporting a single instance of known child sexual abuse to authorities. Again, it's illegal to do that. And we can think about how many children could have been rescued from situations of abuse if they were actually doing what they should have been doing and reporting. So
Are there any, I mean, you earlier told us about the uh, haunting story of that 15-year-old who ended up living in her car. I'm afraid to ask what is the conclusion of that story, but you can answer that. Or are there any other positive stories? Here's a story of Linda, who went through a horrible ordeal. She's now married, she has 3 kids, and she's a neurosurgeon. Because it always gives people a sense of purpose to know that there is a way out of the infinite darkness.
well, I would say in the case of Serena, I couldn't be more proud of what she's done to help bring justice to herself and to so many other victims. So not only did she courageously share her story in the New York Times article that really blew this up in 2020, but she is suing. And I say she's suing the literal hell out of Pornhub, its owners, Visa, the hedge funds, and she's making enormous progress in what she's doing to get justice and to help prevent this in the future. So, she's progressing in her life. She has support. She has advocacy support, and she's trying to get a business up and running that she with something that she cares about. So I don't want to go into too many details about her, but she is trying to move forward, and also just courageously, like, talk about the honey badger. I mean, Serena, right? The
Wow.
one that was actually abused, going and taking it on and head on, even though she's faced a lot of backlash and attacks that I talk about in my book, with even her specific story of things that happened to her after she spoke out. And then there's other victims too that are doing the same. That a 12-year-old boy in Alabama, he was drugged, overpowered, and raped in 23 videos. The rapist, his name is Rocky Shea Franklin. He's in prison for 40 years, and he uploaded those rape videos to Pornhub, and they were being sold pay to download content in a profit sharing partnership with Pornhub. And, police reached out multiple times to get those down. Pornhub ignored the police until the third time when they finally removed it after 7 months. But that victim, that boy, is currently suing Pornhub in Alabama, and he just filed his amended complaint a couple weeks ago. And it's powerful. And I think that if it goes to trial, I mean, these could be $1 billion judgments for what's happened to these victims. And I'm anxious to see what happens.
Incredible. I mean, it points to something that I've talked about, this idea of faux victimhood, which of course none of the people that you're talking about belong in that category. They're the epitome of real victims. And how in our society today we tend to lionize all these fake victimhood story. And I always tell people, I grew up, my childhood was in the Lebanese Civil War, and we faced some very, very difficult circumstances. And I always tell people that, it cheapens the victimhood narratives of actual victims when you try to ascend the social hierarchy with your fake, Jussie Smollett stories. And then you hear stories of these, unimaginable victimhood stories, real victimhood stories, and that people can still persevere. It's certainly it's invigorating in a sense, because you know that there's always a brighter day tomorrow. Okay, let's suppose that we pressed the magic button, we waved the magic wand, and we got rid of all of these diabolical issues. What would Laila wake up tomorrow to tackle next, given her
I think
infinite
I would
honey?
just take a break, play with my kids, have time to read really good books. And, what a wonderful day that would be when there's no more work to do in this particular fight. I
So
look
it's not
forward to
so.
that day.
The reason why I'm asking this is that there are other injustices that exist that could just as easily invoke your ire and your indignation. So that if I solved pancreatic cancer tomorrow, that doesn't mean that I need to retire. Maybe the next day I'll tackle diabetes. So for you, is it a singular issue, which is of course gigantic and infinite in how evil it is, but that would you, given sort of your own sense of purpose and meaning, always want to look for the next battle? Or would you say, look, I've contributed enough, I got rid of child sex trafficking, mic drop, I'm done, I'm retiring at the beach in Newport Beach?
I don't know what would happen at that point. I mean, it's definitely a situation we have to imagine, right? Because
It's not going to end tomorrow.
it,
Yeah.
it probably, well, I could probably fight this until I'm old and gray and on my deathbed, right? But in that case, I have just felt again, for so long, just this passion for this very specific and narrow issue, and even getting even more narrow, even in the last 4 years of going just after a particular behemoth, right? Like Pornhub and its parent company, MindGeek, and to the point where it's like I'm a broken record, just going after the same thing again and again. And it's even gotten more narrow, right? Even than generally sex trafficking at large in the world. And that feels to me to be the place, where I want to just keep focusing my attention. And when it's over, God willing that there is a day when that happens, I guess we'll see, if there's something else that stirs my heart the way that this has. And if that were to happen, then maybe there's a new journey on a different issue. But for now, this is it.
From your lips to God's word, God's ear. This is the book, people. Take down, go read it. It's a fantastic book. If every person had your mindset, we wouldn't be facing all of the problems that we are facing in the West today. Laila, thank you so much for coming. Stay on the line so we could say goodbye offline. Real
Thank
pleasure
you for
having you.
having me. It was just a wonderful conversation, and I really appreciated it. Thank you.
Thank you, Laila.